He said he needed space and time to think. What he really needed was a beachfront suite with another woman, paid for by the money we'd been saving for a down payment on our first home. I found out on a Monday. Not because he confessed. Not because I snooped. But because I got a fraud alert from our bank, asking if I'd authorized a $6,842 charge at a luxury hotel in Tulum. We had a joint account. Or rather, we had one until 6:42 p.m. The night before, when he drained it dry and left a single note in the transaction description, personal business trip. I called the hotel, barely able to get my name out before a woman answered. She said, "Good evening, this is Valentina at Guest Services. How may I help you, Mr. Carson?" There was a pause. Then she added, just a little too quickly. "Oh, sorry. I thought this was the room." I didn't say a word. I just listened. To the silence that followed. To the static of her breath. To the confirmation I wasn't meant to hear. That's where it starts. I'm Chloe. 32. Calm. Practical. The kind of woman who double-checks the locks at night and folds laundry while it's still warm. I'm not dramatic. I don't break things when I'm angry. I don't shout. I don't post cryptic messages online. But I do remember. And I calculate. We'd been together for 7 years. Engaged for 1. He proposed at my grandfather's cabin, the same one where he taught me how to bait a hook and tie a proper knot. That place meant everything to me. He knew that. And still, he chose it for the lie. Grandpa Paul passed last fall. He left me the cabin, his old Jeep, and a letter I haven't had the strength to reread. What I do remember, clear as the sky the day we spread his ashes, is what he said to me the week before he died. Don't ever let anyone mistake your silence for weakness. Still waters carve through mountains, Chloe. That's your kind of strength. I didn't know it then, but that was the last real gift he ever gave me, a permission slip to be who I truly am, without apology. The cabin sat empty for months. I kept saying I'd go up and sort through his things. But I didn't. Grief has a way of turning time soft and strange. Now, I find myself back in the driveway of that cabin, gripping the steering wheel so tightly I feel my own pulse. He doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm still in our apartment downtown, crying into my coffee and waiting for his return flight. He thinks he has time. He doesn't. Inside, the cabin smells like dust and cedar. The air is thick with old paper and something fainter, hope, maybe, or memory. I flick on the lights. The bulbs hum before flooding the space with gold. On the mantel, Grandpa's favorite photograph still stands, the two of us on the lake, holding up a fish we never meant to keep. Behind it, tucked into a hollowed-out book, is what I came for. I don't need revenge. Not the kind that makes noise. I just want what's mine. And as it turns out, he gave me more than enough to take everything I need, quietly, thoroughly, and without a single lie. What he didn't realize was this. He didn't just cheat on me. He underestimated me. And that's always the last mistake. I turn back toward the open doorway, where the late autumn wind curls through the frame like an invitation. Tonight, I'm not going back home. I'm going to rewrite what that word even means. The quietest plans are the ones that change everything. I wanted mine to be invisible until it wasn't. I powered the cabin's router with a surge protector I kept in the hall closet, the one he never could find because it required opening a door, bending down, and looking. The signal blinked awake like a small animal testing daylight. I set my laptop on the kitchen table where my grandfather used to sort screws by size and purpose, and I began the work that steadies my breath, listing, proofing, connecting. I didn't draft a speech. I drafted a ledger. Money is a map of choices. He'd left me a trail, withdrawals that aligned with flight times, charges that mirrored sunsets, transactions that glittered in the margins like confession. He thought being charming made him careful. It never did. What I came for in the hollowed-out book was exactly where I remembered, a brass key on a faded leather thong and a folded card with a name in my grandfather's firm black handwriting. Not instructions. A compass. The key belonged to a safe deposit box in town. The card? Just a first and last name, a number, and 2 words, for emergencies. I pressed the paper to the table with my palm until the urge to cry passed. Grief is loud when you don't let it speak. Tonight, I let it murmur and kept working. I logged into the joint account and moved the remaining $12.16 into a new account in my name, the one I'd opened years ago because my grandfather told me to always have a door only I could unlock. I set alerts on anything with our shared address and disabled the autopays I used to carry like a waitress with a full tray, trying not to spill. The phone buzzed. An international number. He said, "Service is spotty. Don't overreact." I replied, "Send a copy of the work itinerary." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. He didn't send anything. I screenshotted the message and saved it to a folder I named by date and time. If self-respect had a sound, it would be the soft click of organized evidence falling into place. Pressure arrived in subtler forms. A mutual friend texted because he'd told her he was worried about me. A neighbor from the apartment building forwarded a photo of a delivery left at our door, his brand new garment bag I didn't know he owned. The hotel charge posted. The spa fee settled. A boat rental deposit cleared. My chest tightened in that precise way grief tightens, a squeeze around the lungs that says, "Pay attention." I stopped reading the numbers and started reading the habits. Flights booked with a burner email he'd created 2 months ago, using a password formula I recognized because I'd helped him choose something secure but memorable once when he locked himself out of a streaming account. He had recycled the structure, vanity disguised as complexity. He always did. The temptation slid toward me like a glass across a bar. If I used my knowledge of his formulas, I could walk straight into his hidden folders and download everything. 1 guess, 2 at most. The easy way. The fast way. The kind of shortcut that tasted like justice for exactly 5 minutes and regret for years. I closed my eyes and pictured my grandfather, elbows braced on this very table, explaining why you keep clean books even when no one is looking. "Because you are someone," he'd said once, handing me a pencil. "And you're the one who has to look." I didn't guess his passwords. I wrote a list of everything I could access without violating myself. Bank statements with my name on them. Text sent to my device. Email exchanges forwarded to our shared address because he liked convenience. Receipts for items shipped to an address I paid for. Photos in the cloud he had invited me to, back when promises were still easy. The cabin answered me with a long creak when the wind shifted. I almost laughed at the superstition of it. But I was not alone. The past held my hand steady. I drove into town just before the hardware store closed. The clerk, who'd known my grandfather, didn't comment on my red-rimmed eyes or the way I stood too straight. He sold me a fireproof safe and a pack of tamper-evident bags. I bought a fresh external drive and a ream of paper heavy enough to convince a judge if I ever needed to convince one. Back at the cabin, I scanned and printed until the stack was an inch thick, account histories, rent stubs, shared utility payments with my name at the top, screenshots of messages that used the slippery language of men who build a trap out of ambiguity. Business trip. Exhausted. Need to recharge. I did the math, months of small withdrawals disguised as fuel or meals that, when mapped, created the outline of an affair. You could trace it with your finger like a coastline. I introduced pressure to a timeline and watched it confess. When my eyes blurred, I made tea and stood by the window, looking at the black slice of the lake through the trees. My phone buzzed again, another international number. Not his. She said, "Is this Mr. Carson's partner? We have a question about the card on file." I replied, "Who is this?" She said, "Valentina from Guest Services." I didn't answer. I simply recorded the call afterward and transcribed the timestamp in my notes. In some places, recording a call requires both parties' consent. Here, it doesn't. But I still chose the cleaner route. I kept to what was mine. When the tea went lukewarm, I called the number on my grandfather's card. He said, "You must be Chloe. Paul told me you're the calm in a family storm." I replied, "I need to move quickly without being reckless." We kept it brief. He explained quietly what my grandfather had set up years earlier, an emergency trust with my name as the sole beneficiary, dormant but ready, designed to hold any asset I wanted protected from someone else's choices. It wasn't wealth. It was structure. A legal spine. I didn't understand every clause, but I understood the shape of protection. And I understood urgency. We arranged a meeting for morning. He would drive up, bring papers, and, his phrasing, "Let your steadiness drive the timeline." I wrote his instructions on an index card. Then I tucked the brass key into my jeans pocket like a talisman. Before bed, I made 2 more calls. The first was to my employer's HR line to freeze beneficiary updates on my insurance and retirement accounts. He'd asked casually, a month ago, about adjusting them for when we do the final paperwork after the wedding. I'd smiled, changed the subject, told myself not to gather ominous meanings in harmless questions. Tonight, I didn't wait for meanings to find me. The second call was to the bank to remove my name from overdraft protection on his card. They asked for reasons. I said, "Change in circumstances." The representative could hear everything I did not say. I lay down on the couch at 2 in the morning because I didn't want to sleep in the bed where my grandfather slept, not with the weight of all this in the room. I kept the lamp on. I kept my phone face down. At 4, I gave up on sleep and began drafting a letter to myself in my own handwriting, the way you sign a pact when you realize the person you must remain loyal to is the one typing. I wrote the rules that had governed my life before love promised a shortcut: tell the truth. Document the truth. Choose the long way if the short way stains you. Listen more than you speak. Don't bargain with your own dignity. The pages steadied me like a hand on the sternum. By 7, the sky had softened into the color of old denim. I showered, braided my hair the way I always did when something mattered, and put on jeans and a sweater that didn't look like armor but was. He texted at 7:14. He said, "We should talk before things spin out." I replied, "Put your plans in writing." He said, "You're being dramatic." I put the phone down and made eggs I didn't taste. The gap between what he called drama and what I called boundaries had always been wide enough to swallow us both. Pressure found new doors. A shared friend messaged that he was telling people I'd been unstable lately. His mother sent a vague note about forgiveness. A number I didn't recognize left a voicemail with a woman's laugh buried in the background noise. People love a story. They don't care if it costs you your name. I said all of it beside my stack of documents like 2 kinds of evidence, one for court and one for the part of me that remembers who I am. Data and character. Both mattered. By mid-morning, the lawyer arrived, a gray sedan in the gravel, a man with kind eyes and a worn briefcase. We worked at the table without ceremony. He explained the trust, I asked questions in a calm voice, he answered without talking down to me. We moved my half of the savings, the cabin deed, and the Jeep title into the structure my grandfather had built for a future he suspected I might face. I signed where he indicated and initialed margins when necessary. When he left, he took copies and left me with originals sealed into folders thick enough to be felt through grief. He paused at the door, not to offer platitudes but to meet my eyes like a peer. "You're doing this the right way," he said. I nodded. Not because I needed his approval, but because I needed to hear the words. Afternoon thinned toward a pale evening. The lake went flat like glass. I reheated coffee and wrote a list of next steps. Change the locks at the apartment. Remove him from the emergency contact form at my doctor's office. Cancel the florist. Call the venue. Let them keep the deposit, let it be the price of learning. Temptation returned in subtler form, the hotel number again, then an email to our joint address with a PDF attached, an invoice that would be proof. I hovered over it. The clean way would be to ask the sender for confirmation in writing. The fast way would be to open it silently, export it, and pretend it arrived another way. I chose the clean way. I replied with a request, from my own address, with a signature block, asking that any documents regarding charges tied to my name or address be sent directly to me. I didn't mention him. I didn't mention her. I let the facts do the walking. At 5, I took the brass key into town and walked into the bank where the safe deposit boxes lived behind a thick door that closed with a sympathetic thud. Inside the box, I found what my grandfather always promised existed but never flaunted, a packet labeled "For Chloe, when quiet must be strong." Inside were templates for transferring assets, a checklist for separating finances, an index card with 3 names, people he trusted to tell me the truth when I might doubt my own. And at the bottom, a small velvet pouch containing his wedding band. He must have kept it there after my grandmother died. I slid the ring onto my index finger, where it stopped at the first knuckle. Weight, but not heavy. On my way back, I passed the mailbox at the end of the dirt road and saw an envelope with my name in his handwriting. Not my grandfather's. His. Logan had written to me, the postmark from 3 days ago. He'd sent a letter while he was already on his trip. I opened it under the porch light. The letter was exactly the kind of thing men write when they don't want to be interrupted, apologetic in shape, evasive in substance, preemptive in tone. He said, in ink rather than text, that he needed space and that the timing was unfortunate and that he hoped I wouldn't make rash decisions while he got clarity. He wanted to talk when he returned. He wanted understanding. He wanted everything but accountability. I folded the letter back into itself and placed it in the folder with the invoices. I wasn't going to ration my fury into cryptic lines on social media. I wasn't going to decorate it or weaponize it. Fury is useful only if it fuels something steady. I turned off the porch light and stood in the doorway for a moment, feeling the wood under my palm. It was the last minute of the day when I still believed I could do all of this without him ever showing up here. I let myself imagine a clean corridor forward, legal steps, logistical closures, no scene. Then my phone vibrated on the table inside, skittering slightly on the wood. An alert from the airline app I'd forgotten to delete, his flight had landed, early. A second vibration, a message that made the air shift around my ribs. He said, "Where are you, Chloe? Your location just pinged somewhere familiar." Headlights swept through the trees at the bottom of the drive, slow, searching, patient as a lie that thinks it has time. Headlights can look like mercy until they reach your door. I stood very still and let them find me. He killed the engine and the forest exhaled. Gravel ticked as it settled under his tires. I watched him through the mesh of the screen, a shadow stepping out of a brighter shadow, the outline of a man I'd loved arranged exactly like every memory and nothing like the truth. He didn't knock first. He reached for the handle as if nothing had changed. The latch caught, and the thin metal of the screen door hummed with the pressure of his hand. He said, "Why are you here?" I replied, "Because this is mine." The porch light pared his expression down to essentials, charm pulled tight over calculation, worry dressed as warmth. He shifted to the second move men like him use, compassion with an edge. He said, "You scared me with that location ping." I thought. I replied, "Don't tell me what I felt. Come inside if you can be quiet." I let the door swing open before he could decide which version of concern to wear. He hesitated like there might be a trap, then stepped into the air I had scrubbed with lists and fact, with paper and steady breath. The cabin smelled like cedar and winter clothes in the back of a closet, honest smells. Logan was all cologne and hotel soap. I sat at the table without offering him the chair opposite me. He took it anyway. His knee bounced under the wood. He looked at the stack of printed statements, then at the small voice recorder on the placemat. He said, "Is this really necessary?" I replied, "Yes." He smiled, the practiced one that had sold me on thrift store couches and Sunday morning pancakes and 7 years of patience. It fell off his face when I didn't return it. He said, "Chloe, you know I've been under pressure. The timing looks bad, but... I replied, I'm not your mirror. You don't need me to reflect your point back to you. He glanced at the window as if someone else might save him from this room. No one came. The lake stayed a black blade through the trees. I slid one page across the table. The hotel charge, his card, the date. I said, explain this. He lifted the paper, then lowered it as if weight were a surprise. He cleared his throat. He said, I was comped for part of it. You know how these conferences work. The boat rental was for clients. It's how deals happen. I replied, which clients? Silence arranged itself between us, tidy as a napkin. He said, don't do this. I replied, name one. His knee stilled. His mouth opened, then closed on a different story. He said, it wasn't supposed to go like this. I needed space to think. I replied, you needed my money. He bristled at the word my, then smoothed his face again, reaching for the script where I softened things for him. He said, it's our money. I replied, it was. He leaned back, a small pivot toward indignation. He said, you moved everything. Do you know how that looks? Panicky. People are worried about you. I replied, you called them. He didn't deny it. He just lifted his shoulders in a practiced shrug that used to pass for vulnerability. He said, I told them you've been tired. Ever since your grandfather. I asked someone to check on you. That's all. There was the shape of the trap, place concern around a woman like a collar and then call it a necklace. Before I could answer, tires hissed on the gravel again. Another set of headlights slid across the wall. The knock was careful, 2 measured beats. The deputy stood with his hat in his fingers, a square of polite authority in a doorway my grandfather had planed smooth. He introduced himself by name and explained there had been a call requesting a welfare check. He looked at me when he spoke, not through me. It mattered. I kept my voice steady. I told him I was safe, that no one here had threatened me. He took in the table, the papers, the recorder, the way I sat and the way Logan leaned, and a softness came into his eyes that wasn't pity. He asked if I wanted anyone removed. I said not yet. He gave me a card with a direct number, his handwriting across the top. He didn't ask for details that would require me to bleed for his report. He nodded, turned, and the Forest exhaled again as his car eased away. Logan let out a little laugh that wasn't joy. He said, now we're involving the sheriff? Jesus, Chloe. I replied, you involved them when you called. He spread his hands as if to encompass the room, as if to reorder it with a gesture. He said, can we be adults? I'll wire the money back when I get the reimbursement. The timing got messy. I shouldn't have left like that. I replied, write down what you just said. He stared at me as if I'd suggested we fight with swords. I pushed a blank page and a pen toward him. He didn't touch either. So I changed the angle. I said, you can leave. Or you can sign a promissory note for the full amount you withdrew from any account with my name on it. You will identify the trip as personal. You will acknowledge receiving goods or services not related to my work or well-being. I waited for the question. He didn't disappoint. He said, what do I get? I replied, the opportunity to keep your story small. He blinked. He knew what small meant. Quiet. Not invisible. Contained. He picked up the pen. While he wrote, his phone lit the underside of his jaw with the kind of urgency you can't style away. The screen flashed a name and a company I knew only as the logo on his laptop bag. He silenced it. It rang again. He put it face down. I watched his hand move across the page. There are moments you realize what you once loved in a person is also the mechanism that breaks you. His confidence had built tables and plans and vacations made out of nothing but certainty. It had also walked into this room and assumed it would win. He signed, then pushed the paper back toward me with a small flourish as if someone had asked him for an autograph. His phone rang a third time and he answered by reflex, putting it on speaker the way he always did when he needed to perform multitasking. A clipped voice filled the room, female, composed. She said, "Logan, it's Nora from compliance. We've reviewed your corporate card activity. There are irregularities including international charges and duplicated submissions. Effective immediately, your card is suspended and your system access revoked. HR will expect you at 9 on Monday for a review. Bring documentation. Do not alter any files." He scrambled and fumbled the speaker off. He didn't look at me for a long beat. He said, "It's nothing. Bureaucratic nonsense." The lie was small. The panic wasn't. It clung to him like humidity. He reached for a new strategy. Shame disguised as sacrifice. He said, "I'm going to lose my job if this leaks. Is that what you want? After everything we've planned?" I replied, "I want my name back." He let the word name hang in the room like it was furniture he hadn't noticed before. Then he pushed his chair back and stood too abruptly, knee hitting the table, coffee sloshing against ceramic and settling without spilling. He moved toward the bookshelf, picking up the photo of my grandfather as if he needed a different witness. He said, "Your grandfather would tell you not to burn your life down over pride." I replied, "My grandfather taught me what a boundary is." He replaced the frame and turned, angling toward empathy again, toward a softer expression that used to involve cupping my elbow like a handle. He said, "Okay. I messed up. I panicked. The market's been unstable and the clients, to keep them, you have to." He cut himself off, took a breath, and changed lanes. "Tell me what to do, and I'll do it." I slid another document across the table, an inventory of the autopays I'd already cancelled, the locks I would change, the accounts I had secured. I said, "You will not contact our landlord. You will not be in the apartment when I arrive to collect what is mine. You will not log into any account with my name attached to it. You will send me, in writing, a list of any debt you've taken in the last year that mentions me, directly or indirectly." He squinted. He said, "Debt?" I didn't. The rest of his sentence ran headlong into the sound my phone makes when a filter catches a word I've told it to watch for. The screen lit with an email from a lender I didn't recognize, subject line, ACH authorization confirmed. My hands didn't shake. They didn't need to. I opened it and read the first paragraph out loud. A business cash advance. Initials that matched mine. An electronic signature that matched all the ones I used when we booked wedding vendors last spring. The deposit account listed was our joint. The guarantor name, mine. The application IP address originated from our apartment. The date aligned perfectly with the first burner email he'd created. I said, "Tell me you did not sign my name." He found indignation again like a coat he could put on with muscle memory. He said, "It's a formality. Everyone does it. It's just to secure rates and then you swap the guarantee later." "It isn't." I replied, "It's fraud." He opened his mouth, closed it, and looked at the recorder as if it were a small hot stove. He said, "Turn that off." I replied, "No." The room got smaller on both of us. That was pressure being honest. He stepped closer to the door, not quite ready to leave, already practicing the story he would tell himself on the drive down the mountain. I let him rehearse it silently. I had no interest in helping. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail transcription from a number tagged as Valentina, guest services. The words dropped in like pebbles into a still bowl. "We are emailing the folio you requested. Please note, per policy, the primary guest approved naming the secondary guest on record." I kept my eyes on him while I opened the attachment. The hotel's letterhead was smug. The folio listed room charges with generous specificity. At the bottom, under additional guests, a name I recognized from stories he'd told about the office, the one person who could shepherd his projects through approvals when timelines slipped, the one whose signature made messy accounting clean. Not his boss's wife. Not a stranger. Someone with power where he worked. I slid the paper toward him without comment. He flinched but recovered quickly, going for indignation again, grabbing at the closest lever. He said, "You can't use that. It's private." I replied, "It's mine." He didn't argue the point because he understood contracts even when they were emotional. The wall clock carried us forward a few more minutes. He asked to talk again tomorrow. I told him to put it in writing. He tried to touch my arm. I took one step back. He tried to apologize without admitting anything. I told him to read the paper he'd signed until the words meant something. He left without slamming the door. I stood and listened to the gravel until the sound emptied into the trees. When it was quiet enough to hear my own name again, I put the signed confession in a tamper-evident bag and slid it into the fireproof safe with my grandfather's ring and the emergency trust papers. The click was soft and final. I rinsed the coffee cups and let them air dry. The ordinary tasks kept the panic from deciding it lived here. Then the world tilted, not with headlights this time, but with paper. A courier walked up the path in a navy jacket and handed me an envelope thicker than it should have been for what it contained. My name misprinted with his last name, the one I never took. Inside, a demand letter from the lender with a cheerful logo and predatory teeth. As personal guarantor, you are responsible for the outstanding balance. At the bottom, a deadline that pretended to be a courtesy and a sentence that set the terms for the next part of my life. Failure to respond may result in immediate action, including legal proceedings and account levies. I sat at the table and let the words arrange themselves around me until they became furniture. I looked at the deputy's card. I looked at the lawyer's number. I looked at the ring that didn't fit my finger and understood what boundary would cost. When the phone lit again, it wasn't Logan. It wasn't the hotel. It was a number I didn't recognize and a message short enough to be a fuse. She said, "You don't know me. I'm the one from Tulum. We need to talk before Monday." Peace didn't arrive like forgiveness. It arrived like space, clear, breathable, and mine to keep. I read the text twice to make sure I was seeing it as it was written. Then I replied with a time and a place that belonged to neither of us, the lawyer's office, with a window that faced the river and a receptionist who had seen every expression grief can wear. She was already there when I walked in. Younger than I expected, older than the way he had described her, composed in the clipped way people adopt when they've been holding a door closed with their back for too long. She introduced herself quietly and apologized for the intrusion. Not for Tulum. For interrupting a woman who had clearly chosen quiet. We spoke in short sentences. She laid out a folder, not a performance. Expense reports. Email chains. Hotel confirmations that named her as secondary guest because he'd told her it made negotiating easier to seem like a couple. The files weren't a confession so much as a record of gravity. Decisions had fallen where they would because of the shape he gave them. She didn't cry. Neither did I. It wasn't that kind of meeting. She said, "Compliance will escalate. I've already turned over my login history and a statement. I'll add that the charges were personal." I nodded. It wasn't absolution. It was a fact that might save me time. She said, "He told me you'd understand. That you were practical." I believed him until I saw the folio. I didn't tell her what I believed. Belief had become a tool I used carefully. The lawyer joined us and took notes the way good counsel does, not mining my pain for leverage, just helping me arrange it into something the world would recognize. We filed an affidavit for the lender, attached the demand letter, and requested immediate removal of my name as guarantor on the basis of fraud and unauthorized e-signature. The deputy's card became a police report, the police report became a case number, the case number became leverage that made the lender's tone change from cheerful to precise. They weren't on my side. They were on the side of process. It was enough. The woman from Tulum asked for nothing except to be recorded accurately. She did not ask me to spare her. She did not ask me to punish him. She only asked me to accept the timeline. Monday would come, and with it, a meeting where she would repeat under oath what she'd told me in this room. I thanked her for telling the truth where it mattered, and I meant it. Truth is a currency that spends slowly and well. After she left, the lawyer and I drafted something that looked like closure in a specific shape, a consent judgment for the amount he had withdrawn, plus interest and fees, to be filed only if he failed to make repayment as scheduled. It wasn't art. It was scaffolding. We also filed for a temporary order protecting the cabin address and my workplace from his unannounced visits. It wasn't a restraining order, not yet. It was a line on the floor anyone could see. I drove back to the cabin with nothing in the passenger seat except a manila envelope and the small velvet pouch with my grandfather's ring. The trees were turning the color of old copper. The lake looked like something a hand could smooth if it were careful. I parked the Jeep and sat with the engine ticking as it cooled, feeling the steady hum of a day spent choosing the long way. The lender called that evening. Their specialist spoke in a tone that had been trained not to sound like apology. The account would be flagged as disputed. Collection efforts would pause. They would investigate the signature. They would compare IP addresses. They would send a notice acknowledging my claim. It wasn't mercy. It was procedure. But when I hung up, my breathing changed anyway. I cooked for the first time in days, eggs and toast and a tomato I'd bought from a stand on the drive home. The ordinary felt like a ceremony. I ate standing at the sink, then washed the plate and left it to dry. The lamp over the table warmed the edges of the manila envelope. I didn't open it. I already knew what it contained, paper that would present itself exactly the way people fail to do, legible, indexed, patient. Monday came as promised. I did not go to the city. I did not attend his meeting with HR. I did not wait at a coffee shop to see him walk out. The woman from Tulum sent a single text at noon, "It's done." She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask her to. Some facts don't need adjectives. The compliance officer called my lawyer to request a written statement from me limited to dates and amounts. We sent it with the promissory note attached and the police report number at the top. Later that afternoon, a form email from his company announced a personnel change effective immediately. My stomach didn't flip. It didn't do anything. The line I drew around my life held. He tried to call that night. 4 attempts. Then one message. He said, "You won." I turned my phone face down and let the words cool to room temperature. This was not winning. Winning implies a game, and I had stopped playing. This was something cleaner, returning resources to their right container and refusing to fill the empty space with noise. I gave notice on the apartment. The landlord told me a story about losing his wife and said I could move my things at my pace. I thanked him and didn't turn his pain into mine. I drove down midweek, after the maintenance man changed the locks. I packed the dishes I'd chosen, the books with my notes in the margins, the quilt my grandmother had made out of dresses I remembered from photographs. I left behind the couch we bought together because I wanted the habit of making a new place comfortable with my own hands. When I came to the drawer with the ring tucked into its jewelry box, I held it just long enough to identify the wish that had lived in it. Then I put it into the envelope with his promissory note and mailed it to an address I knew he checked because it was where packages went when he wanted to feel important. I didn't add a letter. The absence was the message. His mother wrote me a page and a half that sounded like the end of a very long rehearsal. I didn't answer. There was nothing in her script I could use. Some consequences were sharper than I wanted. The woman from Tulum, Elena, was placed on leave while the company decided which parts of the truth offended them most. I wrote a short statement for her, at her request, describing precisely what she'd told me and the documents she'd provided, without interpretation or embellishment. I didn't take sides. I named events. I'm not in charge of another woman's salvation. But I refuse to be the tool that harms her. I told 2 friends. The right 2. We sat at the cabin's small table and said very little. They helped me sand the window frame that had begun to stick in the humidity. We oiled the hinges on the front door. We stacked wood for winter. They didn't ask for the kind of details people devour. They asked if I wanted the bed against the west wall or the north one. I chose north, where the morning comes soft. I took the week after the apartment to be alone in the cabin and do one thing every day that made it more mine. New house numbers on the post, the kind you can see at night. A clean doormat. A light bulb over the sink that didn't buzz. I filed the stamped court papers in the safe, along with the deputy's card and the final letter from the lender that confirmed the unauthorized signature and released me from the guarantee. I held that one longer than the others. Words you can hand to a bank are not the same as peace, but sometimes they're the door into it. When I finally read my grandfather's last letter, I did it at the table where he used to sort screws by size and purpose. The paper had gone soft from time, still crisp at the edges. His voice was exactly where I'd left it, patient, unornamented, kind. He reminded me that endurance isn't the same thing as staying. He told me that I was the sort of person who could carry difficult things far, but that I should choose carefully what deserved a ride. He didn't tell me to forgive. He didn't tell me to forget. He told me to be accurate, then to be free. The day I took the Jeep into town for an oil change, the mechanic looked under the hood and smiled the way men who work with their hands smile when machines behave. On the corkboard by the register, there was a flyer for a community class about small engine repair at the adult school. I took one of the tear-off tabs. Not because I needed a skill. Because making something run well again felt like a sentence I could live inside. My body began to quiet in new places. The space behind my knees when I stood at the sink. The muscles along my jaw at night. The part of my chest grief had made its apartment in, rent-free. I slept a whole night once, then two. I woke to fog lifting off the lake and understood why mornings are always described the same way, because clarity returns how it wants, not how we script it. On a Saturday, I drove the long way around the lake with the windows down. I stopped at a farm stand for apples and spoke only to weigh and pay. When a song we loved came on the radio, I didn't change it. I let it be what it was, sound in the air, not a memory I owed a reaction to. The last logistical task came quietly, a final email from his counsel proposing a longer repayment schedule. My lawyer recommended accepting it with one condition, a confession of judgment filed and held in escrow, to be entered if he failed. I agreed. It wasn't generosity. It was engineering. If he paid, both of us would spend less time in rooms like the one where I'd met the woman from Tulum. If he didn't, paper would do what paper does. When the signed confession arrived, I placed it with the others and closed the safe. No ceremony. Just the knowledge of a door I could open without asking. Spring is the season storytelling loves, but what came for me felt more like late winter, the light a little cleaner, the ground beginning to yield in places that were ready, the rest still firm because that's how it protects what's underneath. I didn't cut my hair. I didn't change my name. I didn't move to a new city. I stayed long enough to understand that leaving isn't the only way to become new. He texted once more, a message so small it barely existed. He said, "I'm sorry." I put the phone back down on the table and went outside to split kindling. Not as an answer. As a practice. When I think about justice now, it doesn't look like a courtroom. It looks like a ledger balanced after months of patience. It looks like a kitchen where I cook for myself with both hands free. It looks like a ring in a velvet pouch that I keep not as a relic but as a reminder, love is not a contract you fulfill by shrinking. The cabin needs a new gutter. The Jeep still starts with that small confident shudder before the engine settles. The lake keeps its own counsel. I write checks that carry only my name. I keep the brass key on a nail by the door. When I close my eyes at night, I don't see headlights or the glow of a hotel lobby. I see my grandfather's handwriting, the straight lines, the space between words, and I feel the way the room felt the day I chose the long way, steady, breathable, mine. I used to think endings required a dramatic sound. This one was a quiet click as paper met paper and a threshold met my heel. I stepped over and didn't look back. The life I'm in now doesn't need a witness to be real. It needs only what it already has, a woman who is no longer negotiable, standing in a doorway she paid for, deciding which light to switch on first. The engine turned over when I turned the key. It didn't roar. It hummed. I backed out of the drive and let the road open, not to escape anything, but to meet what was already waiting, the country of my own name. What do you think dignity looks like when the easiest path is to fight dirty? Would you have taken the long way, or is there a moment where you would have chosen speed over clarity? If these are the kinds of stories that make you think about quiet strength, clean boundaries, and consequences that fit, subscribe and be part of this community.